What if I told you your life isn't shaped by big decisions, but by tiny habits you repeat every day?
Hmm.
From Atomic Habits by James Clear, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your systems.
Right.
So ask yourself, are your habits building your future or quietly destroying it? Let's find out. Hello, everyone. Hi, all.
Hello, and welcome to Book Podcast Zone.
And today we're basically embarking on this massive journey. We are going to unpack a comprehensive 12-part breakdown of the entire framework behind habit formation.
Yeah, we're really getting under the hood today.
Totally. We're completely deconstructing how human behavior actually works. Like, why do we fail so spectacularly when we try to change our lives?
It happens to all of us.
Right. And how can we quietly, almost invisibly, rewire our entire existence? So we have a huge stack of research in cognitive psychology studies in front of us today.
We do. And our mission today is to completely dismantle the way you think about success, failure, and those daily routines you barely even notice you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And to really set the stage for you, the ultimate goal of the text we're analyzing today is a total paradigm shift.
Oh, for sure. Because for decades, society has sold us this incredibly exhausting narrative, right?
Right. This idea that self-improvement requires, like, superhuman willpower.
Yes. If you aren't achieving your goals, you just aren't grinding hard enough. You lack discipline.
Exactly. Or you just don't want it badly enough. It's a highly moralized view of productivity and health.
It really is. It makes you feel terrible about yourself.
Totally. But the reality, which we'll see supported by deep behavioral science today, is that willpower is a highly unreliable resource. It gets depleted.
Oh, like ego depletion, right?
Yes, exactly. In cognitive psychology, ego depletion suggests that our capacity to make disciplined choices actively drains away as we make decisions throughout the day.
So by 8 p.m., you're just out of gas.
You're completely empty. So the shift we are going to explore is moving completely away from that exhaustion model.
Okay, so away from working hard and white-knuckling it.
Right, it's about moving toward a systemic, atomic approach, building an architecture for your life that practically guarantees success without feeling that crushing weight of overwhelm.
I love that. But I think we have to unpack this from the very foundation first.
Definitely.
Because before we can start hacking our routines, we have to establish what a habit actually is.
Mhm.
And more importantly, we need to ask, who is the person performing that habit?
That's the real key, yeah.
So the core info from the first phase of our source material hits you with this deeply counterintuitive truth. Success is not about massive sudden leaps.
It's not the movie montage.
Exactly. It's not the Rocky training sequence. It is about tiny, almost invisible changes compounding over time.
Right, because habits are not just chores, they're quietly writing the story of your identity.
Yes. Focusing on who you want to become turns out to be infinitely more powerful than chasing arbitrary goals.
What's truly fascinating here is the underlying psychology of why most people fail. Usually when you want to change, your brain fixates on the finish line.
Like, I want to lose 50 pounds.
Or, I want to make $1 million. That is pure goal-oriented thinking. But the psychological trap there is that a goal is simply an outcome.
Right. It doesn't address the underlying systems that led to your current state in the first place.
Exactly. People fail because they focus on the finish line rather than the identity of the person capable of crossing it.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to put it.
There's this crucial concept we can call the mirror moment. It's that jarring realization that your current tiny daily choices are actively shaping your future self-image.
So every time I do something, it's like a vote.
Exactly. Every single time you perform an action, you cast a definitive vote for the type of person you wish to become. It's evidence-based identity change.
I love that concept of gathering evidence. But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
Focusing on tiny microscopic changes feels incredibly unrewarding in the real world. Let me give you an analogy.
Okay.
It's like saving loose change in a massive gallon-sized glass jar. You drop a penny in there on day one, and the jar still looks completely empty. It feels totally useless.
Yeah, it does.
You look at that penny and think, I could do this every day for a year and maybe buy a sandwich. So if the brain is constantly looking for rewards, why is our society so obsessed with massive transformations?
Like intense 30-day challenges.
Exactly. Intense 30-day fitness challenges or radical juice detoxes. If these invisible changes are what actually works, Why do we constantly reach for the extreme overhauls?
We reach for them because we are culturally conditioned to love the dramatic climax.
Oh, the before and after photo.
Yes, we want the before and after without having to endure the hundreds of boring days in between. A 30-day challenge gives you an immediate rush of adrenaline,
Right, and a false sense of progress.
a completely false sense of rapid progress.
Right.
Because here is the biological reality of what happens on day 31.
The structure vanishes.
The structure vanishes, the adrenaline wears off, and because your underlying identity hasn't shifted, you just temporarily acted like a different person through sheer brute force.
You rebound right back to your old baseline.
Exactly. The tiny change, the penny in the jar, lacks that cinematic drama. It's fundamentally boring.
Yeah, it really is.
But cognitively, it is a masterstroke because it completely bypasses the brain's threat detection system.
Wait, threat detection? Like the amygdala?
Yes, deep in the brain, your amygdala acts as an alarm system. When you try to change everything overnight, your amygdala flags it as a massive stressor.
A threat to your survival.
Right, and your brain fights back, demanding a return to a comfortable equilibrium. But when you make a change that is invisibly small, the amygdala doesn't wake up.
The brain doesn't resist.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Let's look at a classic local U.S. example. Think about the typical American New Year's resolution.
Oh, yeah, the gym rush.
Exactly. Every January 1st, millions of us sign up for a highly expensive premium U.S. gym chain. I did exactly this a few years ago.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I bought the expensive running shoes, the trendy moisture-wicking clothes, the giant tub of pre-workout powder.
You went all in.
I fully committed to going 5 days a week for 2 hours a day before work. It was a radical overhaul of my schedule.
And let me guess what happened by the second week of February.
I was exhausted, my alarm clock felt like an enemy, and the parking lot of that gym was a ghost town. Everyone else had burned out alongside me. The crash is spectacular.
It's the classic cycle.
Right. But contrast that with this atomic approach. Instead of declaring, I am going to lose 50 pounds by March, you shift your identity to, I am an active person.
Yes, an identity shift.
And the action you take to prove that new identity is so small, it's almost laughable. You simply walk to the end of your suburban driveway every single morning. That's it.
Just to the mailbox and back in your pajamas.
Exactly.
And to the person obsessed with the 30-day challenge, walking to the mailbox seems like a complete waste of energy. They'll say, you didn't even burn 10 calories. What's the point?
Right, they think it's pointless.
But they are completely missing the neuropsychological point. The primary goal of walking to the mailbox isn't cardiovascular conditioning, it's identity reinforcement.
You're proving to yourself that you're the type of person who consistently shows up.
Precisely. You are establishing neurological evidence every single day. Once that core identity is cemented, extending the walk down the block happens almost naturally.
It doesn't require immense willpower because the behavior now perfectly aligns with who you inherently believe you are.
Exactly.
It's a complete foundational reframing of how we view progress. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've established the bedrock. Our habits shape our identity, and our identity drives our habits.
It's a continuous self-reinforcing loop.
Right. But how do we actually intervene in that loop? Because understanding it intellectually is one thing, but how do we build good habits and tear down the bad ones?
You have to open the rule book.
Yes, we need to transition from the theoretical why to the highly practical how. And the source material outlines this actionable framework. The 4 laws that control absolutely every habit in your life.
And the first law, the absolute starting line, is make it obvious.
Make it obvious, which really shatters everything we think we know about discipline.
It absolutely does, because it exposes the massive illusion of motivation. It turns out our physical environment is quietly controlling our behavior far more than our conscious desires ever could.
This raises a really uncomfortable question about human autonomy, honestly.
It really does. We love to believe that we are the conscious captains of our ships, making highly rational choices all day.
But the hard data shows that motivation is incredibly fickle.
Completely unreliable. Motivation is simply an emotion, and emotions are subject to infinite variables.
Like how much you slept, your blood sugar, or a stressful email from your boss.
Exactly. If you rely on a fleeting emotion like motivation to perform a difficult habit, you are mathematically guaranteed to fail eventually.
So we need to rely on our environment instead.
Right. From a neurological perspective, every habit is initiated by a cue, a physical or visual trigger in your environment that tells your brain to run an automated script.
So to master a habit, you have to become the architect of your cues.
By making tiny strategic physical tweaks in your living space, you can create massive psychological shifts. It's like a practical home makeover for your mind.
Okay, I get the concept. But let me throw an analogy at you because redesigning my environment sounds a bit daunting.
Sure.
I picture relying on motivation, like trying to paddle a canoe upstream in a rushing river.
That's a great visual.
You can grit your teeth and paddle hard for a bit,
Yeah,
but eventually you get exhausted and the river pushes you right back down to where you started.
exactly.
What you're saying is that changing your environment is like stepping out of the canoe entirely, picking up a shovel, and digging a trench to change the actual direction of the river.
So the current carries you.
But here's where I get stuck. If our environment is secretly pulling our strings, how do you and I take the steering wheel back without feeling completely overwhelmed? I mean, redesigning my whole life. I don't have the time or money to remodel my house just to eat fewer cookies.
And that feeling of overwhelm is exactly the trap of all or nothing thinking. You don't need a sledgehammer to fix this, you need a scalpel.
A scalpel, okay, I like that.
Taking back the steering wheel is entirely about microadjustments. Look at how the brain processes information. Your brain is a constant prediction machine.
How so?
Its visual cortex scans the room, sees a familiar object, and immediately predicts the reward based on past experiences. It happens in milliseconds.
So if the object isn't there,
The craving often never initiates. You don't need to redesign your whole life. You just need to purposefully redesign the immediate visual field of the spaces where you make your worst decisions.
let's apply this to a specific recognizable U.S. scenario. Picture my kitchen.
All right, painting the picture.
Like many standard American suburban kitchens, I have this massive granite island right in the dead center. And for years, right in the middle, sat a beautiful, clear glass cookie jar.
Oh, dangerous.
It was perfectly lit by pendant lights. The focal point of the room. Every single time I walked through the kitchen, my visual cortex locked on.
The prediction machine fired up.
Exactly. Cookies exist. Cookies are delicious. Eat a cookie right now. Trying to resist that impulse takes immense mental energy. It's paddling upstream.
So what's the atomic environmental hack?
It's ridiculously simple. You take the cookie jar and you move it to the highest shelf in the darkest corner of the pantry, tucked behind a box of stale cereal you never eat.
Out of sight.
Yes. And you replace it on the kitchen island with a bowl of bright red, highly visible apples. You haven't remodeled the kitchen, but you fundamentally altered the cues.
It's brilliant. And we can think about our digital environments too, which are arguably more toxic than our physical ones.
Oh, entirely. Think about the nightly routine of sitting on the couch, mindlessly doom scrolling.
Right. Instead of relying on discipline to put the phone down, you dive into the settings of your Apple or Android phone.
Yeah, and you set an automatic do not disturb mode that activates every night at 8 p.m. right during primetime U.S. television hours.
The screen turns black and white. The colorful notification badges disappear.
The environment is structurally altered, and the visual cue to scroll simply vanishes.
If we pull back and connect this to the bigger picture, what you are fundamentally doing is outsourcing your discipline to your environment.
Outsourcing discipline. That's a great phrase.
You are pre-committing to your future behavior by making the right choice, the most obvious, effortless choice available. When the phone goes gray at 8 p.m., the friction required to keep scrolling increases.
While the friction to pick up a book decreases. You're no longer fighting a war inside your own head. You're letting your surroundings do the heavy lifting.
It's an incredibly liberating shift in perspective.
It really is. Mainly because it removes the guilt. You stop blaming yourself for being weak and start looking at your environment like a puzzle to solve. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next.
Ready when you are.
So, we've made the good habits obvious. But let's be real. What about the bad habits, constantly screaming for our attention?
Because hiding the cookie jar in the pantry isn't always enough.
Exactly. You still know the cookies are in there, calling your name. This brings us to building a robust defense strategy. We need to look at the concept of inversion.
The secret weapon for self-control.
Right. Inversion is about making bad habits entirely invisible and incredibly difficult to execute. Out of sight, out of mind.
And care directly with that defense, we have law number 2. Make it attractive.
This is where we get into some really cool brain science, dopamine hacks, and the sheer power of habit stacking.
Yes, habit stacking. Pairing a new, difficult habit with something you already deeply love doing.
So let's talk about the cultural myth of the disciplined person.
Oh, this completely debunks that myth. When researchers study people who appear to have unwavering self-control, What they find is shocking.
They aren't actually using willpower any more than the rest of us, are they?
Not at all. They have simply structured their lives so effectively that they rarely need to use willpower. They spend vastly less time in tempting situations.
Because fighting temptation head-on is a losing battle.
It relies entirely on the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, future planning part of your brain. It consumes massive amounts of metabolic energy.
And what's it opposing?
The basal ganglia. That's the primal, habit-driven part of the brain. It operates almost automatically and requires very little energy. It's like a toddler driving a heavily armored tank.
A toddler in a tank, I love that.
If the battle between logic and primal craving drags on as your energy depletes, the primal brain almost always wins.
So true. Sustainable self-control isn't about flexing your discipline muscle. It's about protecting your new identity by avoiding the environmental triggers altogether.
Which is the inversion of the first law, making the bad habit invisible. But then we address the second law, making the good habit genuinely attractive.
The romance phase of habit building.
Exactly. You have to literally rewire the brain to actually crave the positive behavior rather than viewing it as a punishing chore.
I think of inversion like building a massive digital or physical moat around your attention, just making it so annoying to access the bad thing that you give up out of sheer convenience.
Yep. Friction is your friend there.
But looking at the other side, habit stacking, I have to express some healthy skepticism here.
Let's hear it.
If I pair something I genuinely hate doing, like my complex tax returns or a brutal workout, with something I love, like my favorite true crime podcast.
Or a piece of dark chocolate.
Right. Aren't I basically just tricking my own brain with dopamine?
Yes and no.
Are we just bribing ourselves the exact same way we bribe a stubborn toddler to eat their broccoli? Does that create a sustainable habit or just a cheap dependency on the bribe?
It's a fantastic observation. The short answer is yes, you are absolutely hacking your own dopamine system. But no, it is not merely a cheap bribe.
Okay, why not?
To understand why it works long-term, look at how dopamine functions. In popular culture, dopamine is called the pleasure chemical.
Right, the reward.
But neuroscientists know that dopamine is really the chemical of anticipation and desire. Your brain releases a massive spike not just when you experience a reward, but when you anticipate it.
Oh, like the excitement of planning a vacation versus actually being on the flight.
Precisely. By tying a behavior you need to do with a behavior you inherently want to do, you utilize an existing neural pathway rich in dopamine.
Classical conditioning.
Yes, very similar to Pavlov's dog salivating at the bell. The dopamine spike from the podcast actually begins to bleed backward in time.
So it associates itself with the difficult habit.
You actually begin to look forward to the chore because your brain seamlessly merged it with the anticipation of the reward. It's building a permanent neurological bridge.
Let's put this neurological bridge into a very real, very painful U.S. context.
Let's do it.
Commuter culture.
Yeah.
You lived in Los Angeles, so you know the absolute soul-crushing despair of sitting in gridlock traffic on the 405 freeway at 5:30 p.m.
Oh, it is the worst.
Or if you're in New York, being crammed into a delayed, sweltering MTA subway car, you are completely trapped.
Yeah.
That is an unavoidable environment.
No, totally unavoidable.
Now, let's say your goal is to learn conversational Spanish. If you try to force yourself to study Spanish when you finally walk through your front door at 7:30 p.m., exhausted from the commute.
It's not going to happen. The prefrontal cortex is out of gas.
Exactly. But what if you use habit stacking? You stack the educational habit listening to an engaging Spanish audio lesson exclusively with the unavoidable habit of sitting on the 405.
That's brilliant. You've transformed an infuriating hour of gridlock into a highly productive mobile university.
Right. You might actually find yourself slightly less annoyed by the brake lights because the traffic is now the designated protected space for this attractive habit.
And we can apply the inversion principle, that defense strategy, to that exact same horrific commute.
How so?
Let's say your deeply ingrained bad habit is stopping for fast food on the way home because you're stressed and just want comfort.
Oh, the glowing neon drive-through signs.
Right. Those massive engineered visual cues are designed to trigger your basal ganglia. Willpower tells you to grip the steering wheel and drive past them.
But systemic inversion says something different.
Systemic inversion says, take a completely different route home. Even if it takes 5 minutes longer and winds through quiet residential neighborhoods, it fundamentally makes the fast food invisible.
You remove the cue entirely from your visual field. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't have to fight the temptation because it never entered your environment.
Exactly.
It's incredibly practical. You aren't constantly testing your grit, you're just taking a right turn instead of a left. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next.
Moving right along.
So we've optimized the physical space. We've hacked our commutes, rearranged our kitchens, built our digital moats. But our environment is not just made of physical objects.
No, it's not.
It is primarily made of people. And this is where the conversation gets extremely complicated.
Very complicated. Humans are messy.
Right. We have to deeply examine how the humans around us act as the ultimate and often the most intensely powerful environment for our habits. We need to look at the social mirror.
How our friends, family, and coworkers quietly, almost telepathically, influence our behavior.
Without us even realizing it.
Yeah.
We need to understand the psychology of habit mirroring and how to tear bad habits out by their source by flipping all 4 laws entirely in reverse.
Making bad behavior invisible, unattractive, difficult, and genuinely unsatisfying.
So break down the social dimension of habits for us.
Well, it's arguably the most profound because it's rooted incredibly deep in our evolutionary biology. Attempting to change a habit in a total vacuum, isolated from social forces, is a monumental task.
Because we are herd animals.
Exactly. For tens of thousands of years on the savannah, to be separated from the tribe meant absolute certain death.
Wow.
So we've evolved complex neurological mechanisms to instinctively, subconsciously mirror the behaviors of our tribe to maintain group cohesion.
We imitate the close, the many, and the powerful.
Yes. We literally possess mirror neurons in our brains that simulate the actions and emotions of the people we observe. When you decide to adopt a new habit that goes against the grain of your social circle, you aren't just fighting laziness.
You're fighting millions of years of evolutionary programming.
Programming that is screaming at you, causing literal physical discomfort, demanding that you blend in to survive.
This inevitably leads to a confrontation phase, right? To root out a bad habit, you have to face the dark shadows of why you were really doing it. Very often, you realize you're engaging in a destructive behavior simply to fit in and feel safe.
That's the painful truth for a lot of people.
I always look at social circles like a massive gravitational pull. You are either getting pulled up into a higher orbit by the ambitious people around you, or getting dragged down into the toxic atmosphere to burn up.
It's a great analogy.
But this poses a massive, incredibly tricky, real-world problem. It's so easy for self-help gurus to say, surround yourself with better people.
Right. Just drop all your friends.
Exactly. But what about the people you can't just abandon? Your family or your job? Here's a scenario I dealt with in my old corporate job.
What happened?
How do we handle toxic habit loops at work? How do you break a negative cycle of gossiping or complaining or eating junk food without completely alienating your colleagues and becoming the office outcast?
That is the ultimate social tightrope walk. Because if you simply stand up and loudly declare, I am no longer participating in these behaviors because I am on a journey of self-improvement.
The tribe perceives that as a direct, hostile judgment on their life choices.
Exactly. Their own insecurities flare up, and they will subconsciously or overtly try to pull you back down into the mud to maintain group cohesion.
So how do you survive that?
The key is to manage the environment without loudly judging it. You have to creatively engineer ways to make the bad habit difficult and unsatisfying for yourself while remaining socially integrated and friendly.
You don't have to make a grand announcement. You just quietly build boundaries. Let's bring this to life with a classic staple of American office culture.
Okay.
It's Friday morning. You walk into the break room to get some water, and there it is, the iconic, massive pink box of glazed donuts from the local bakery.
Always the pink box.
Always. And not only are the donuts smelling amazing, but your favorite coworkers are gathered around, chatting and eating them.
The social gravity is huge there.
Or consider the obligatory post-work happy hour. Everyone in your department heads to the local bar at 5:00 p.m. on a Thursday. It's where the networking happens, the gossip is traded, alliances are formed.
These dynamics naturally trigger intense habit mirroring.
Right. If everyone in the circle is holding a pint of beer, your mirror neurons practically demand that you hold a beer so you don't feel exposed. But if you're trying to cut out alcohol, your goals are in direct conflict with the office culture. How do you survive that without being the arrogant office buzzkill?
This is exactly where you apply the invoted laws in a stealthy way. First, make it invisible and difficult.
Like with the donuts.
Right. If you know the donuts arrive in the break room at 9:00 a.m. every Friday, simply do not walk into the break room at 9:00 a.m.
Bring your own high-quality coffee in a thermos from home that day.
Exactly. Take a completely different hallway to use the restroom on the other side of the building.
Yeah.
You cannot mirror a behavior that you do not see.
And what about the networking happy hour?
That's about making the bad habit unattractive and unsatisfying by shifting the psychological focus. If you determine you absolutely must go for networking, march straight to the bartender and order a club soda with a splash of cranberry and a lime.
So you're still holding a glass.
Yes, you completely satisfy the mirror neuron requirement of the group. No one feels awkward because your hands aren't empty, but you quietly maintained your systemic integrity.
And if someone asks why you aren't drinking,
You simply deflect with a positive identity anchor rather than a rejection of their activity. You say, oh, I've got a really early morning run planned for tomorrow, or I'm testing out how I sleep without alcohol.
you frame it around an addition to your life, not a restriction.
Exactly. Over time, the social group naturally adjusts its expectations. You become known as the one who runs on Saturdays, and the gravitational pull shifts without ever declaring war on the tribe.
It's entirely about outsmarting the system from the inside. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next.
Let's do it.
Okay, so moving into the next phase, we've optimized the physical space, hidden the cookies, navigated the incredibly tricky waters of our social circles.
We've done a lot of prep work.
We have. But let's be totally honest with each other. Even with the absolute perfect environment, a moat around your phone, and a supportive group of friends, actually starting a difficult task still carries an immense amount of friction.
Getting off the couch is the hardest part.
Exactly. We are talking about lowering the drawbridge. How do we make the sheer act of initiating a new behavior so effortless, so ridiculously simple, that it feels entirely impossible to fail?
This brings us to Law 3, make it easy.
Yes, the 2-minute rule. Aggressively lowering the barrier to entry until showing up becomes purely automatic, and discovering the absolute magic of starting stupidly small.
The psychological hurdle of starting that moment right before you begin is the single biggest point of failure in any human endeavor.
Because people mistakenly believe the secret to consistency is having ironclad discipline.
It isn't. The real secret is ruthlessly removing friction. Let's look at what happens in the brain. Your brain subconsciously calculates the total caloric and mental energy required to complete a task before you even take the first step.
It's an evolutionary survival mechanism to prevent wasting precious energy.
Right. If you plan to run 5 miles after work, your brain calculates the immense physical pain, the sweat, and the mental toll of those entire 5 miles while you are still sitting comfortably on the couch.
It immediately perceives that massive energy expenditure as a threat.
And it produces overwhelming feelings of fatigue, procrastination, and resistance.
So the 2-minute rule elegantly bypasses this biological calculation.
Exactly. The rule states that when you start a new habit, the action should take less than 2 minutes to complete.
So read before bed each night shrinks down to read one single page.
Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take my yoga mat out of the closet. The neuroscience here is specifically about establishing a baseline neural pathway. You have to standardize a habit before you can optimize it.
You cannot improve a habit that does not exist yet.
Right.
Okay, John, I hear you, but I have to stop and inject some healthy, realistic pushback here.
So lay it on me.
Because this sounds way too good to be true. 2 minutes. Come on. If my goal is to radically get in shape and lose weight, and I only work out for 2 minutes, I haven't even broken a sweat.
It's true.
My heart rate hasn't elevated. I haven't burned a single measurable calorie. Does starting stupidly small actually matter in the real physical world? Or is this just a clever psychological trick self-help books use to make us feel productive while doing the bare minimum?
It absolutely feels like a trick, and I understand the skepticism, but neurologically speaking, it is the single most vital step you can take toward lasting change.
Okay.
The problem with your pushback is that you are confusing the outcome with the process. In the very beginning stages of habit formation, the outcome, burning calories, getting visibly stronger, is entirely irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
Entirely. The only thing that matters is the process of becoming a person who consistently shows up. A 2-minute workout undeniably seems pointless on a physical level. But on an identity level, it is a monumental shift. You are casting an undeniable vote for your new identity. You are generating hard evidence that you are not the person who skips their workout.
Oh, back to the evidence gathering.
Exactly. And here's what actually happens in practice. Those 2 minutes act as a psychological gateway. Once you have overcome the initial friction of starting, momentum takes over.
Like Newton's first law of motion. An object in motion tends to stay in motion.
Yes. It requires significantly less mental energy to continue doing an activity once you have already started than it does to overcome the massive inertia of starting in the first place.
Let's map this onto something almost everyone is incredibly guilty of. American binge-watching culture.
Oh, the Netflix trap.
Imagine you come home after a brutal, stressful 10-hour workday. You are mentally fried, your ego is completely depleted, the comfortable couch is actively calling your name, and the Netflix menu is practically turning itself on.
The friction to watch TV is zero.
Right. Now your original, highly ambitious goal was to drive across town and endure a 90-minute, high-intensity CrossFit class.
Yikes.
The gap between your current physiological state exhausted on the couch and the required future state doing burpees until you drop under harsh fluorescent lights is a massive canyon. The friction is insurmountable.
You will fail 99 times out of 100 in that scenario.
So let's apply the 2-minute rule and lower the drawbridge.
Yeah.
You tell yourself that the only commitment, the only thing you have to do to be successful today is simply put on your running shoes and tie the laces.
Even while sitting on the couch and turning on Netflix.
Yes. The barrier to entry is literally zero. It takes seconds. You haven't committed to the torture of CrossFit. You've only committed to tying your laces.
And pay very close attention to what happens in the brain there. Once the shoes are securely on your feet, the brain's energy calculus fundamentally shifts. You sit there and think, well, the shoes are already on. I guess I might as well step outside onto the porch.
And once you are outside, the thought naturally progresses. I'm already outside. I might as well walk down to the end of the block.
You have successfully bypassed the brain's alarm bells and energy conservation mechanisms by aggressively slicing a massive, intimidating goal into an impossibly small, non-threatening micro step.
And here's the real beauty of this system. Even if on some particularly exhausting days you just put the shoes on, sit there for 2 minutes, take them off, and watch TV, you have still won.
You have maintained the ritual. The delicate neural pathway of action after work is being preserved and reinforced.
Waiting patiently to be expanded upon when you eventually have more energy. It's all about keeping the pilot light on, even if you aren't firing up the whole furnace that day. As long as the flame is there, you can build on it. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates, and let's continue to the next.
Excellent.
All right, so we are finally playing the long game. We've mastered starting small, utilize the 2-minute rule, and build genuine momentum. But then, suddenly, progress comes to a terrifying grinding halt. You hit the wall. What happens when the initial novelty of the new habit completely wears off, the excitement fades into boredom, and you are just staring at a frustrating flat line of zero results?
This is the danger zone, and it brings us to Law 4. Make it satisfying.
The ultimate key to long-term retention.
Exactly. We have to figure out how to manufacture motivation when our visible progress completely slows down and the results feel entirely invisible. We have to transition from a temporary behavior into a permanent, unshakable identity.
So how do we do that? Because this specific phase is exactly what separates the tourists from the residents in any field of mastery.
We call this frustrating flatline the plateau of latent potential. It is a fundamental law of physics, nature, and human systems that significant outcomes are almost always severely delayed.
Give me a physical metaphor for this.
Think of a solid ice cube sitting on a table in a room that is currently 25 degrees Fahrenheit. You start putting in work, expending energy to heat the room.
Okay, so the temp goes up.
Right. You raise the temperature to 26, 27, 28 degrees. You stare at the ice cube, but it doesn't do anything. It hasn't changed at all.
You are putting in the daily work, adding heat to the system, but there is absolutely zero visible result to reward you.
29, 30, 31 degrees. Still nothing. It feels like a complete waste of time. But then you hit 32 degrees and suddenly the ice begins to melt rapidly.
The intense work you put in when the room was at 26 degrees wasn't wasted?
No, it was simply being stored as kinetic energy before the phase change. It was latent. Every massive life transformation hits this exact flat line.
This painful plateau where you are faithfully putting in the daily effort, doing the 2-minute drills, but the scale hasn't moved a single pound.
Or the bank account hasn't grown a single dollar. The foreign language still sounds like gibberish. This is the exact critical moment the vast majority of people quit because they mistakenly believe their system is broken.
Right. To survive this brutal phase, You need psychological mindset tools to trust the architecture of your habits even when the physical evidence refuses to materialize. That ice cube metaphor is brilliant.
It perfectly captures the physics of delayed gratification.
But let me tell you, it feels so incredibly agonizing when you are the human being stuck sweating at 29 degrees. I always compare this plateau phase to the messy middle of a massive cross-country road trip.
The messy middle.
Yes, imagine you are driving from New York City all the way to California. The start of the trip is thrilling. You're navigating out of the city, the music is blasting, you have a full tank of gas and high hopes.
And the end of the trip is glorious. You finally see the Pacific Ocean.
But day three is the messy middle. You are driving straight through endless, flat, monotonous cornfields in Nebraska. You can't see the skyline where you started, and you are still thousands of miles away from your destination.
It is incredibly boring.
Your back hurts, and you start seriously questioning why you ever left the comfort of your home in the first place. So here is my big question for you. If the results are completely invisible during this messy middle in Nebraska, how do we manufacture enough satisfaction to keep going?
How do we fulfill that fourth law?
Yes. How do we make it satisfying when the universe is stubbornly refusing to give us any natural rewards?
That is the ultimate survival question. If the universe isn't giving you a natural reward yet, you have to deliberately engineer an artificial one to sustain the behavior until the natural rewards finally kick in.
How do we engineer that?
This is exactly where the psychology of visual measurement comes into play. Because the actual progress is currently invisible, you need to create a highly visible proxy for that progress.
Like a habit tracker.
Exactly. Literally putting a giant satisfying red X on a physical wall calendar every single day you complete your 2-minute habit.
To a logical adult, it seems almost childish.
It does, but the brain's reward center doesn't care. The brain gets a micro hit of dopamine from the sheer completion of drawing the X. It provides immediate, tangible satisfaction to close the neurological loop.
Oh, that makes sense.
There's a very famous story of a highly successful stockbroker who utilized this beautifully. He kept 2 large glass jars on his desk. One was entirely empty, and the other was filled with 120 paper clips.
Okay, paperclip.
Every single time he made a difficult sales call, he immediately moved one single paperclip from the full jar to the empty jar.
So he didn't focus on the sales numbers.
Not at all. The sales were often totally out of his control, highly delayed and frustrating. He focused purely on the immediate, intensely satisfying visual progress of moving the paperclips.
You have to train your brain to derive its dopamine and satisfaction from the flawless execution of the system itself, not the delayed outcome. That concept translates perfectly to the typical mid-year slump we see everywhere in the U.S.
Oh, the April slump.
Exactly. Think about corporate workplaces or universities around late April or early May. In January, the New Year novelty is high. Everyone is buying planners.
And in September, the new semester energy is buzzing.
But by late April, the weather is shifting, the deep exhaustion has completely set in, and the initial burst of ambition is completely gone.
There are no major, exciting milestones happening.
You're just endlessly grinding through Q2 reports or prepping for brutal finals. It becomes a pure, unadulterated test of trusting one's established systems.
Because the initial motivation is dead.
Right. The people who actually survive the April slump and succeed aren't the ones relying on the fleeting burst of ambition they had back in January. They are the ones who simply quietly follow their habit tracker.
They move their metaphorical paperclips from one jar to another.
And deeply trust the physics that 29 degrees will eventually, inevitably become 32 degrees.
Precisely. They have successfully made the ultimate transition. They have shifted from outcome-based habits to identity-based habits.
Because the person who quits in April looks at the results and says, I'm not getting the promotion fast enough, my bank account isn't growing, so what is the point of working this hard?
But the person who persists, the person who has internalized the system, says, I am a professional who executes my system daily. I am a runner. I am a writer. The promotion or the weight loss is merely a lagging indicator of my daily habits.
When you fundamentally fall in love with the process, rather than obsessing over the product, you do not have to wait months or years to give yourself permission to be happy.
You can be profoundly satisfied anytime your system is running correctly.
And paradoxically, by taking your eyes completely off the prize and focusing entirely on the system, You reach the prize much faster and with significantly less anxiety.
It really is an incredible, life-altering shift in perspective.
And that brings us to the synthesis of this entire massive journey we've been on today. We have traveled an incredible, sweeping arc together.
We covered a lot of ground.
We started at the very foundation by uncovering the invisible, deeply compounding effect of tiny, seemingly meaningless changes, and how those microscopic actions are secretly forging the very core of our identity.
Then we opened the rule book and learned how to aggressively hack our physical environment so that good decisions literally stare us in the face while bad decisions are hidden in the dark.
We built robust psychological defenses against our absolute worst impulses by inverting the rules, making bad habits invisible and difficult.
And perhaps most importantly, we learned how to decode and rewrite the complex, evolutionary social code of our workplaces and friend groups to protect our progress without becoming outcasts.
We dramatically lowered the drawbridge. We threw out the toxic, exhausting idea of grueling discipline, and instead we shrank our most intimidating tasks down to 2 ridiculous minutes.
Just to prove to our own brains that we had the capacity to show up.
And finally, we learned how to survive the desert. We learned how to push through the agonizing plateau of latent potential, manufacturing our own daily satisfaction with paper clips and calendars.
Until that temporary, fragile behavior hardened into a permanent, unshakable, new identity.
And the most vital, empowering thread tying all of this massive psychological framework together is realizing that absolutely none of this requires superhuman willpower.
You do not have to be born a different species of human to achieve your wildest goals.
It is simply about opening the hood of your own mind and strategically adjusting the highly predictable systems that are already running in the background of your life.
You are already a highly efficient habit machine. You are just learning how to direct the machinery with intention now.
It is completely about becoming the active architect of your life, rather than the passive victim of it. So, as we wrap up this incredibly deep session, I want to leave you with a lingering, powerful question to take with you into the rest of your day as you look at the routines you are about to perform.
Let's hear it.
If your daily habits are the invisible authors of your life's story, what chapter did you just write today, and who is the character you're going to wake up as tomorrow?